Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Stokes Sounds Off. I'm your host, James Stokes. Our beloved prophet, President Russell M. Nelson, makes history again today as he becomes the first apostle and prophet to celebrate his 101st birthday. Let's talk about this wonderful man whom we sustain as the prophet, seer, and revelator for the church, and the only man currently authorized to exercise all priesthood keys. Russell Marion Nelson was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, to Marion C. and Edna Anderson Nelson on this day in 1924, just a day before the birth of Boyd K. Packer, his future immediate predecessor to the presidency of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. Though young Russell grew up in a loving family, his parents were not active in the church. As a teenager, he went looking for books about the church at Deseret Book. His parents allowed him and his siblings to be baptized when he was 16. President Nelson married his first wife, Danzel, in the Salt Lake Temple. They have 9 daughters and 1 son. When his wife unexpectedly died in 2005, he described having inconsolable grief for a time. He married Wendy Watson, a BYU professor, the following April. He studied at LDS Business College and went on to obtain his Bachelor of Arts and medical degrees at the University of Utah. He simultaneously trained as a surgeon and did doctoral studies at the University of Utah. He was part of the research team that developed the first heart and lung machine that was used for an open heart operation on a human being in 1951. He spent 2 years on medical duty for the U.S. Army during the Korean War, then underwent another training period in Boston at the prestigious Harvard Medical School's Massachusetts General Hospital. At one key point in his medical career, the University of Chicago was anxious to get him to come and teach at their School of Medicine. So the president of that university asked Alan H. Oakes, then a professor at the law school in Chicago, to try and persuade Brother Nelson to come. Then Brother Oakes did his best to convince then Brother Nelson to accept the offer, but Church President David O. McKay advised Brother Nelson not to go, so he turned down that opportunity. In 1955, Brother Nelson accepted a teaching opportunity at the University of Utah School of Medicine, where he built his own heart and lung machine. Around a year later, he was on duty to perform the first pediatric cardiac operation. In 1960, he performed the first successful operative repair of a tricuspid heart valve. Being worried that a surgical procedure he had been asked to perform was too risky for anyone to do, he requested and received a blessing from then Elder Spencer W. Kimball of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, who was one of his patients. That surgery was a success, and he later used that same technique to operate on Elder Kimball himself, a risky procedure which only moved forward following a pointed directive from President Harold B. Lee, who at that time was serving as first counselor in the first presidency. While performing that operation, Brother Nelson had the overwhelming feeling that President Kimball would one day be the president of the church. As a result of that operation's success, church members were blessed to enjoy the counsel and ministry of President Kimball for almost another decade and a half after that. The doctor-patient relationship he developed with President Kimball enabled Brother Nelson to write a letter of assurance about President Kimball's health when the latter was called as church president. President Nelson has served in many positions on different hospital boards and has received several prestigious awards for his pioneering work. He likewise had many service opportunities in the church. He served as a stake president for over 6 years, during which time he served alongside another future fellow apostle, Elder Joseph B. Worthland. In mid-1970, Ernest L. Wilkinson, who was then the president of BYU Provo, submitted his resignation, which went into effect early the following year. As Elder Neil L. Maxwell, then Commissioner of Church Education, searched for a replacement, Brother Nelson was one of the candidates considered for the position, which was in due course filled by Brother Nelson's future apostolic seatmate, Dallin H. Oaks. In the meantime, Brother Nelson was called in June of 1971 as a Sunday School General President, during which time Brother Worthland would again serve alongside him. Brother Nelson would go on to also serve in the now defunct calling of Regional Representative of the 12, during which time, having been present when President Kimball suggested that some of them should learn Mandarin Chinese, took that task on in obedience to the Prophet's counsel. In April 1984, with the advice and consent of President Spencer W. Kimball, President Gordon B. Hinckley, then serving as the second counselor in the first presidency, called Brother Nelson to fill one of 2 vacancies in the quorum of the 12 apostles. Then Brother Oaks was called to fill the other vacancy, and the 2 have sat side by side in the quorum of the 12 apostles, and now in the first presidency since that time. In the natural course of life events between then Elder Nelson's apostolic call, which was announced on April 7th, 1984, and early July 2015, the church had lost 4 church presidents, and all of the apostles senior to then church president Thomas S. Monson, in addition to all apostles junior to President Monson but senior to Elder Nelson. The last of those was President Boyd K. Packer, then serving as president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, whose passing on July 3rd, 2015, led to Elder Nelson becoming the de facto president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. He was officially set apart in that capacity 12 days later, on Wednesday, July 15th, 2015, by Church President Thomas S. Monson, who had by that time begun to scale back his involvement in the day-to-day administration of the church. When the church released an official statement in mid-May 2017, which noted that President Monson would no longer be taking an active role in leading the church, as the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, President Nelson filled a vital role in assisting President Monson's counselors, Presidents Henry B. Eyring and then President Dieter F. Uchtdorf, in taking care of the day-to-day administration of the church. When President Monson himself passed away on January 2nd, 2018, President Nelson directed the affairs of the church as the senior apostle and the de facto acting president of the church for 12 days before his ordination and setting apart as church president. Following his ordination, he met individually with each of the other 12 apostles to get their input on who should serve as his counselors and who should be called to fill the vacancies in the quorum of the 12 apostles. Once that process was complete, he selected as his counselors his seatmate, Elder Oaks, and Elder Henry B. Eyring, who had served as a counselor to both Presidents Monson and Gordon B. Hinckley, as his first and second counselors respectively in the first presidency. As a result of that reorganization, Elder Dieter F. Uchtdorf again took his place in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. During the broadcast and subsequent press conference, when the new First Presidency was introduced to the world on Tuesday, January 16th, 2018, President Nelson paid tribute to his predecessor's counselors and mentioned that both were willing to now serve where they were most needed. The responsibilities assigned to Elder Uchtdorf upon his return to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles were those that had previously been held by the senior three apostles of the church, Presidents Nelson and Oakes, and the new acting president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, M. Russell Ballard. Even prior to serving as the president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, or subsequently as president of the church, President Nelson always took great care of his fellow brethren in the apostleship. Many of you will recall how, in the midst of an address about charity, the pure love of Christ, Elder Joseph B. Wirthlin began shaking uncontrollably. In a silent demonstration of what his colleague was teaching, Elder Nelson stood by and supported Elder Wirthlin until he closed his address, then gently helped him back to his seat. A short time later, not long after Elder Richard G. Scott underwent the needed surgical procedure, he was surprised to learn that President Nelson had stood inside the operating room observing the procedure in its entirety. And of course, as recounted during the funeral of Elder Robert D. Hales following the Sunday morning session of the October 2017 General Conference, President Nelson felt impressed to skip his lunch break and go immediately to the hospital to visit Elder Robert D. Hales, who passed away within a few minutes after President Nelson's arrival. President Nelson has demonstrated a keen intellect, a willingness to seek for and follow the revelation from the Lord, and an undeviating loyalty to and full commitment to his family, his church responsibilities, and his apostolic colleagues. We have seen him respond swiftly to such revelation, and perhaps the greatest details of revelation he continues to receive regularly are yet to be revealed in the upcoming October 2025 General Conference. I have always been impressed and touched by President Nelson's remarks in General Conference. He has given a total of 112 addresses thus far in General Conference, including 65 following his call to the apostleship, 5 given while he served as president of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, and 42 so far which he has given since becoming president of the church. By all accounts, although he is still in recovery from his back injury, and despite his age, he continues to think, move, and act with the health, vigor, and energy of one several decades younger than his current 101 years. Something Sister Nelson has repeatedly mentioned in public comments is that she is highly suspicious of his birth certificate because he is anything but a typical centenarian. I am grateful for the chance to have paid this birthday tribute to President Nelson. He and all of the other apostles have my unequivocal, everlasting, and undeviating support and sustaining vote. I know for myself that President Russell M. Nelson is a prophet of God, that he will not lead us astray, that he speaks for and on behalf of the Lord, and that we will be blessed by the Lord as we follow the counsel given by his chosen mouthpiece. I invite you all to stay tuned here for my coverage of the latest updates from the Church News, the Newsroom, and the Church of Jesus Christ Temple sites. I'll be sure to pass word of those along to you all here as soon as I can after I learn about them. In the meantime, that does it for now. All comments are, as always, welcome and appreciated on any video or short at any time, as long as all such feedback is made in accordance with the established guidelines. I hope any of you who would like to share anything will take your opportunity to sound off in the comment section below. If you like what you watched here and would like to stay informed of newly added videos and shorts, please consider subscribing to receive the applicable updates from this channel. Thank you for the privilege of your time. Until next time, I wish you all the best and pray that the Lord will bless you all in everything you do.